Every parent knows the name of their most loved child. In the family of Jacob, the household carrying the covenant forward from Abraham and Isaac into the generation that would become the nation, that child was Joseph. Genesis 37:3 in the Berean Standard Bible. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a richly ornamented robe. In the ancient Near East, a robe like that from a patriarch was a public declaration of status, the garment of the designated heir, the one who would carry the covenant name forward. Jacob was not merely expressing affection. He was announcing to the whole household, "This is the carrier." And his brothers hated him for it. Genesis 37:4 tells us they could not speak a peaceful word to him, not a civil greeting, not a courteous word across the table. And when they found him alone at Dothan, with no witness but the empty field and the pit cut into the ground, they stripped him of the robe, threw him into the cistern, and sat down to eat bread, while their brother's voice rose from below. Genesis 37:28 in the Berean Standard Bible. So they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. 20 pieces of silver, the price set for an underage slave under Leviticus 27:5. The carrier of the covenant, the one God had already spoken to through dreams of sheaves and stars bowing, arrived in Egypt wearing a slave collar. Not a single verse in Genesis 37 records God explaining why he allowed it. This is exactly the moment where we need the Hebrew word at the center of this series. The word is sheret, shinalef resh yod tav, she-e-rit. The root verb shar means to remain, to be left over, to survive when everything else is taken. Sheret is the remnant, the surviving portion. What God preserves after the catastrophe, what remains when the flood recedes and the fire goes out. This is the specific Hebrew technical term this entire 20-episode series is built around. In the ancient Near East, who survived a conquest or a famine was never treated as accidental, and Israelite theology carried that conviction further still. The Sheret was not luck. It was the seed group God preserved on purpose so the covenant promise could continue. Joseph is the first figure in the canonical record who is not merely preserved through a catastrophe but is explicitly positioned by God to preserve others through one. He is also the first to use the word himself. Genesis 45:7 in the Berean Standard Bible. God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. The word translated remnant is Sheret. Joseph speaks it standing in Pharaoh's court, looking at the brothers who sold him, giving them the theological interpretation of his own 20 years of descent. He does not say God protected him in spite of what they did. He says, God sent me. The carrier stripped of his robe and sold for slave price is the one who keeps the covenant people alive when the famine comes. The rejected carrier becomes the preserver of the Sheret, and centuries later, the prophets will reach for this same word to describe the same pattern. Isaiah 10:22. One speaks of the remnant of Israel who will rely on the Lord. Micah 2:12 promises God will assemble the remnant of Israel. Jeremiah 23:3 pictures God gathering the remnant of my flock from all the countries. Joseph's confession in Genesis 45:7 is the seed from which every one of those later prophetic promises grows. Psalm 105 is the canonical commentary the biblical authors placed on the Joseph narrative. Psalm 105:17, 1:9 in the Berean Standard Bible. He sent a man before them, Joseph, sold as a slave. His feet were hurt with shackles. His neck was put in a collar of iron. Until what he had said came to pass, the word of the Lord tested him. 3 things here matter. First, the subject of he sent is God, not the brothers, not the Ishmaelite traders. The pit was not an obstacle God merely allowed on the way to the plan. It was the vehicle of the plan, moving the carrier from Canaan to the one throne room in the ancient world with the infrastructure to manage a 7-year famine. Second, the method of sending was humiliation. The carrier arrived not on horseback but as property, as inventory to be bought and used, and God was doing this through the degradation, not despite it. Third, the word of the Lord tested him is precise. What was being tested was not Joseph's character in some general moral sense, but the specific prophecy of the sheaves and the stars bowing down. Could the carrier hold that promise through the pit, through Potiphar's prison, through 2 additional years forgotten after the cupbearer failed to remember his name? Stephen, in the longest sermon recorded in Acts, names 2 things in a single sentence that must be held together without collapsing one into the other. Acts 7-9 to 10 in the Berean Standard Bible. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt. But God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. The jealousy was real. The betrayal was real. The collar was real. And God was with him. Those 2 realities stand in the same sentence without canceling each other. The carrier is not protected from harm, the carrier is accompanied through it. Romans 8:28 in the Berean Standard Bible is the canonical principle Joseph's life demonstrates 15 centuries before Paul writes it in theological language. And we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. The pit, the false accusation from Potiphar's wife, the forgotten years in prison, every stage that looked like the end of the carrier's usefulness was actually a stage of his preparation. You cannot run the food supply of a civilization from a position of comfort, and you cannot sustain a 7-year famine response with a character that has never been tested by extended loss. The depth of what Joseph suffered was calibrated to the scope of what he would be entrusted to manage. This is not a pattern unique to Joseph. Moses is prepared in the wilderness before he is sent to Pharaoh. David is prepared in the cave before he is crowned. The descent precedes the commission every time. Now we are at Genesis 50. Jacob is dead. The brothers who sold Joseph for slave price stand before the second most powerful official in Egypt, the man who holds the food supply for the region, terrified now that their father's restraint is gone. They send word ahead. Our father commanded before he died that you forgive us for what we did. And Joseph wept when he received it, not from anger, but from the full weight of 20 years of recognition pressing down on a man who already knew the answer to the question his brothers were asking. Genesis 50-20 in the Berean Standard Bible. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. The Hebrew text uses the same verb for both halves of that sentence. Chashav, to devise, to weave, to plan deliberately toward an end. You were weaving harm, Chashavtim, evil. God was weaving preservation, Chashava, for good. Same verb, different subjects, different intentions running simultaneously through the same pit, across the same years, and only one of them was building toward the Sheret? This is the Preservation-Through-Rejection Principle in its full canonical statement. God positions the covenant carrier at the precise place the remnant will need preserving, and the path to that position always runs through the place of greatest rejection. Not despite the rejection, through it. Isaiah 43-2, in the Berean Standard Bible, seals the pattern for every generation. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep you under. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched. The flame will not set you ablaze. The word is not that you will never pass through waters. The word is that when you pass through them, I will be with you. The promise is not removal from the passage. The promise is presence through it. SEE. The first discipline of the covenant carrier is honest recognition after the season has passed. Genesis 50-20 is only possible because Joseph could look back at the whole of what had been done to him and see what the brothers never intended. This week, go to the last significant season of rejection in your life, the relationship that ended without resolution, the position you were removed from without cause, the investment you poured out that was never acknowledged. Do not ask why God allowed this. Ask instead what was being positioned through it, and what shear it. He may have been preparing you to preserve. Write your answer in one sentence. Hold. The second discipline is maintaining the word during the season when everything visible directly contradicts it. Psalm 105-19 says the word of the Lord tested him whether Joseph could hold the dream through the years when it looked impossible. When the pit and then the prison looked like the final answer. Name the specific promise you have been holding. The word from God. The conviction you received in your highest season, that your present circumstances now seem to deny. Write it down. Date it. Commit to holding it through the forgotten season, through the delay that outlasts every point where holding still makes sense. Trust. The third discipline is surrendering the right to write the final interpretation of your own rejection story. Joseph says in Genesis 50:19, "Am I in the place of God?" The carrier does not determine the meaning of their own suffering or assign the final significance to their own betrayal that belongs to the one who was weaving below the surface of every event you could only see from the bottom of the pit. The surrender does not minimize what was done to you, it simply relocates the authority to assign meaning to the one who was weaving the whole time. Release the conclusion you have been insisting on. Trust the one who sent Joseph ahead present in the collar, the prison, and the forgotten years to write the final verse of what you are walking through right now. The robe was stripped. The pit was real. The price was 20 pieces of silver and 0 explanations. And 20 years later, the man who was sold stood before the people who sold him and said, "Do not be afraid. God sent me ahead to preserve the chariot." The carrier who is in the pit today is not abandoned. The carrier who is in the collar today is not forgotten. The descent is not the end of the carrier's story, it is the beginning of the positioning. And the God who sent Joseph ahead before the famine came is still sending carriers ahead before the catastrophes this generation has not yet walked into. Genesis 50:20 in the Berean Standard Bible. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Subscribe and stay with us as we trace the remnant pattern forward through the full canon. And before you go in the comments, tell me this. What season of your life, only in looking back, only from the other side of it, can you now see as positioning rather than abandonment? What pit turned out to be preparation, not what you believe theologically, but what you have actually lived. I read every one.